Okay guys, I'm about to fire up Cleanflight, and you do need a flight battery to check your motor rotation in Cleanflight. I'm going to switch over to a screenshot and micro USB cable for plugging it into the naze.
Okay guys, welcome to Cleanflight. So I'm going to connect. This is the first time I've connected to this board. Serial port is open. So you'll see that the only option here is the firmware flasher, and that's because my naze board has baseflight on it. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and select firmware to flash onto this board. So I'm just going to take the latest stable naze, and so I'm going to take, it looks like February 17th. I'm going to select that, and then you have to click load firmware. Once it's loaded, there's some release notes. I'm not going to check any of these boxes. I'm just going to do the default flash. So I'm going to click flash firmware, and if you scroll up, you'll see the status bar at the top: erasing, flashing, verifying. It's pretty quick, a few seconds. Program successful. Okay, so now I should be able to click connect, and voila, we have Cleanflight, and there's the quad. Right now we're just going to check the motor rotation, so I'm going to do the bare minimum, and to do this, leave your props off, guys. So we're going to hop straight over, well, first thing actually, we're going to configuration, make sure we do have the X quad selected, and yes, it is selected, and we'll go over all the other stuff we need to do for this build later. So go to the motors tab, and you'll see here, if you check this box, you can play around with the motor. So that's what I'm going to do now. And in order to use this, I have to power up the rig. So now I'm going to plug in the battery. So you don't even need your receiver configured or the radio on to do this. So you can just check it on. There it is. Motor 1.
Move the motor 1 slider up. You can see the motor 1 spins.
Is rotating. But now I'm going to check the rotation itself. And that motor is rotating backwards. So motor 1 needs to be fixed. Check motor 2. Motor 2 is backwards. Now motor 3. Motor 3 is rotating correctly. And lastly is motor 4, and motor 4 is correct. Okay, cool. So we only have, I got to correct the rotation of motor 1 and 2. They're rotating backwards. And then one more thing I'm going to do while we're in here is I'm going to go ahead and calibrate the ESCs. So you can do that by using the slider where they all go at the same time. So you have to unplug the rig, which we'll do first. And this is simulating your radio for Simon K. So we're going to go full throttle, the 1850. You're going to plug in the rig and listen for the Simon K single beep calibration. There's a single beep. It's all 4 of them. And then you slide it all the way down. They're calibrated. So I'm going to unplug the rig now.
Okay, so we have to reverse motors 1 and 2. Okay guys, the last thing to do here is to zip tie down these motor wires to keep them from getting snagged on stuff too easy. I do that just right in between the clamps. Can't even see the zip tie. All the hardware's in there. Now everything left to do is on Cleanflight. Okay, here we are back with the Mini Mamba plugged into my computer, and I'm going to fire up Cleanflight. I did just check the motor rotation to make sure it was fine. Most of what you can do in Cleanflight for this kind of configuration that you're going to see, you don't need the battery plugged to the rig. You just need the USB power onto the naze.
So the first thing I do is set the quad down on a very level surface, calibrate the accelerometer, and then I'm going to go into configuration to tell it the board offset. The board offset is right here, right at the top. And we did a yaw, and I believe it's -90. If you can't remember if it's plus or minus, just try it and then go back to that first screen. And that's what I'm going to do. And always press save. It's going to save and reboot in Cleanflight on this page. Click on setup. Okay. So now I'm going to check roll left, roll right, pitch down, pitch up. Perfect. So -90 is if you rotate it counterclockwise. Plus 90 would be rotating it clockwise. So now that that's done, I'm going to show you the S.BUS. So you go to the ports config tab. There is this one extra step in Cleanflight because they make the flexibility of the first two ports are hardware ports, and the second two are emulated in the firmware, so you can actually use them for other things. But the pin 4, where we attached our S.BUS receiver, is actually UART2. So that's the serial port we're using, and we want to set that to serial receiver. So you must do this first, save and reboot, in order for the configuration to work correctly on the second tab. So now I'm just going to click and see it remembers this. I have a serial receiver there. Now, second, before I forget, because we're going to use a Spectrum receiver, you must change the order of the channels. So it's called the channel map in Cleanflight. Normally, like when I'm just using PWM, a non-serial receiver, and plugging each channel on its own wire, I just swap the throttle. But you cannot do that on a serial receiver or on a CPPM receiver. So you just simply pick JR Spectrum Grafner on the last on the list, click Save, and then go back to the Configuration tab. Now, to complete the setup for the Spectrum receiver with S.BUS, you come down here, and the default is a PWM receiver, parallel. So we need to change that to selection 2, which is receiver serial, which includes S.BUS. Select that. And then down here, where it's S.BUS. It's not Spectrum. That's for a Spectrum satellite receiver, which is completely different. So select S.BUS. And that's it for the serial receiver settings. Now we're in here, I'll show you a couple of other things before I save and reboot that I typically change. I don't like the motors to spin on startup, so I enable motor stop. And here's if your ESC support one-shot. That's something I'm going to do in a future video. For now, I'm going to leave it this way. And go ahead and press save. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is go to the receiver tab and check my radio settings. One of the trickiest things in Cleanflight, well, on the naze in general, Cleanflight or baseflight, is getting the board to arm using the throttle down and right, and that's how I prefer. I've always learned that way. So it's affected by your minimum throttle and your minimum throttle and your minimum command. On my Spectrum radio, I've found that I have to set the throttle range on the low end to 125%. That's on a DX7S. And I go on the high range 115% on the throttle. That's the most important aspect on the transmitter itself. And I also use dual rates, and I have those at 85% low and 100% high. But I have the board doing all of the expo now. So let's jump over the receiver tab. Now you can see here all of a sudden we have 14 channels because this serial receiver, the S.BUS receiver, actually supports 14. So I'm going to go ahead, and in order to see the effect of my actual radio, I have to turn my radio on and then power up the rig. Of course, I still have my propellers disconnected. Okay, so roll right, roll left, I'm on the sticks, pitch forward, pitch backwards, yaw left, yaw right, throttle up, throttle down. And so you'll want to reverse any of those channels, and I think I did reverse the channels earlier. I copied this model, and I want to check if the arming works. There, I saw the light come on, and it works. Without changing any of the throttle settings or anything in Cleanflight, you just have to make sure that your range on your throttle on your spectrum is 125% on the low end, and you'll be good. Now the next thing we're going to do is set up the switches. So what I like to do is I put the buzzer on auxiliary 1, which on the spectrum is actually gear channel, and then I like to put the flight modes on aux 2, which is actually aux 1 on a spectrum terminology. But the important thing here is to see the throttle is responding because we changed the channel map. So let's go over to the modes tab. Now you're going to notice this is quite different than base flight, but it's pretty cool. So I'm not going to use arm because I'm using the stick arm and disarm. So the first thing I'll do is beeper. So you click add range, and this yellow range is where it becomes active. So this is aux 1, and when I flip that switch, you'll see the position I currently have in, it's on the low and the high is outside the range. So if you had a 3-position switch, this would work in the middle, but I have a 2-position, so I'm going to slide this up, and that's for the buzzer. Turn it on and off. So I'm going to press, and then the middle is really 15, so I'm going to move to 15, and save it. There. Now that it's saved to the board, you can hear the beeper actually works. And then I am now going to, I like to add horizon and angle on a 3-position switch. So horizon mode is going to be on aux 2, and it's going to be in the middle. So here's my middle position. Just like that, when it's on high, it's off, so I don't need to move these sliders at all. And then angle is more restrictive, and I'm going to put it up at the high end in the 3rd position. So I'm going to move this over to here, like that. We don't want them to overlap at all. So here we go, horizon, angle, but see I didn't change this, aux 2, there we go. So these slide at the same time. So when I'm down and off, both are off. Middle is horizon mode, and top is angle mode. So I'm going to press save once again, and that's saved to the board. Now I can see the red LED light comes on in the nays. Also, they changed to green when it's saved. And once again, the beeper turns green. That's it on your switches. If you have GPS and whatnot, yeah, that's what these other modes are for. So what's left really is only the PID tuning. First, I'm going to go to receiver one more time because I like to use an RC rate of 1 or 100% and expo of 75, and I'm going to save that. And then over on the PID screen, I will set the roll yaw rates here and never change the rates on the receiver. That's how I like to work. Okay, what I'm going to do is put in the PID settings for Mini Mamba running on 3S with 6x4x props. So the P's are 3.2. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you or point out that you'll notice there's multiple PID controllers in Cleanflight, and there's significant differences in the scales and numbers when you switch to these, so it's not trivial to just switch to one of these other controllers. Although I've played with both PID controller 1 and 3, and I almost have one of my quads tuned on 3. It's kind of advanced at this point and quite a bit experimental, quite honestly. So you want to stick on PID controller 0. It's exactly like what's on base white. So anyway, 3.2, 3.2, 25, 20. I like a little less correction on my pitch because of fast forward flight. And 23, 23 is good there. And on yaw, I do 8 and 40. And this remains 0. And then down here, level is used by both angle and horizon mode, and I find 9 is way too aggressive. If you actually wanted to use level, I fly on manual mode now, but it's a really great way to learn how to fly FPV. But it's too aggressive at 9. You're constantly fighting the auto level action from the board, so dialing that down to 6 and then upping the integral a little bit, I find it a lot smoother. So I recommend 6 and 25 and leave that at 100. And I'm going to save, and then rates. Now with rates, I fly roll pitch like around 70, 80. And for Nick, I'm going to put this at 60 and 60, and then he can bump it up if he likes to fly a little more aggressively. And then TPA is a throttle adjustment as you increase your throttle. On a mini quad, on this PID controller, you still need it. I found it 45 is just right. And there is another setting on the CLI. It's very important, I almost forgot about, is the loop time. And the loop time, because I have Simon KESCs here, and they're super fast Simon KESCs, so I could probably go above 2400, but to start with, I'm going to set the loop time to 2400 because I know it works. On any Simon KESC with at least 400 hertz. So say set loop time, press enter, say save, and it's going to reboot. When it's done rebooting, I'm going to go back to the screen that confirms that I'm rebooted. And one more tweak that I like to make is on the minimum cell voltage, I find that 3.3 is a little bit too chirpy when you're punching the throttle a lot, so I always drop that down to 3.2. And save it. And we're rebooted. Okay guys, thanks for watching. That's it for Cleanflight. Now I'm going to go out for test flight.